بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. في محاضرة اليوم سوف نتكلم عن رواية وايد سارغوسا سي للكاتبة جين ريث. قبل أن نقرأ ونحلل هذه الرواية من المهم جدا أن نقرأ رواية شارلوت برونت جين إير، وهناك تحليل موجود على القناة قبل ما نحضر هذه المحاضرة، لأن هذه المحاضرة مبنية على رواية شارلوت برونت جين إير. Wide Sargasso Sea by Jane Rhys. Jane Rhys, she was born in 1890 and she died in 1979. Jane Rhys was born in Dominica and lived until she was 89, but success came too late. She traveled to Europe. She has a colonialism heritage. She got married 3 times, and she had bohemian lifestyle, had a life troubled with madness, violence, and alcoholism. So, the background of Jane Rhys: she was born in Dominica, lived until she was 89, but success came too late. She traveled to Europe, married 3 times, had a life troubled with madness, violence, and alcoholism, and she led a bohemian lifestyle. The background information of the novel: the novel was written in 1950, published in 1966. Time when women were beginning to demand a voice. And when we talk about the 60s, we talk about the radical feminist movement spreading all over Europe and America. Positions of women, Black people, and other groups were discussed, and we call them the marginalized groups. Ideas of freedom, post-war euphoria, economic slump and depression, issues surrounding colonialism, slavery, and it was a response to Charlotte Bronte's novel Jane Eyre. So the novel was written in 1950s, published in 1966. It was the right time for women, time when women were beginning to demand a voice. Positions of women, Black people, and other groups were discussed and become the focal point. Ideas of freedom, post-war, euphoria, economic slump, these are the modern themes in modern novel. Issues surrounding colonialism, slavery, and the novel was a response to Jane Eyre. What are the main themes of Wide Sargasso Sea? We have colonialism, we have race, we have gender, we have insanity, madness, love, truth, happiness. These are the major themes in the novel. Colonialism, and we have several lectures about colonialism and history of colonialism on the channel. Race, gender, we have lectures about feminism on the channel. Insanity, love, truth, happiness. These are the main themes. Also, we have sub-themes or smaller themes like past and memories, flashback, rejection, belonging, not belonging, naming, identity, supernatural, isolation, loneliness, racial identity, position of women, poverty, different interpretation, past and present secrets, repression of painful memories, motherhood, mothers and daughter. So these are the sub-themes, and all of them are included under themes which can be discussed by a modern novel. past and memories, flashback, rejection, belonging, not belonging, naming, identities, a supernatural, isolation, loneliness, depression, racial identity, position of women, women's rights, poverty, different interpretation, past and present, secrets, repression of painful memories, mothers and daughter. So when it comes to the plot, when it comes to the plot, Wide Sargasso Sea was inspired by Charlotte Brontë. It was written 100 years earlier, and we know that this novel was written in the mid of the 19th century. Antoinette was based on Persia in Jane Eyre. This character aroused Rhys' sympathy, and she was determined to write her side of the story to show her as something other than the mad woman in the attic. And we know that Persia Mason was portrayed in Charlotte Brontë as a mad woman who lived in the attic that Brontë had marginalized in her story, and she focused on the white woman, Jane Eyre. For that reason, this novel was written as a reply uh, against Charlotte Brontë, Jane Eyre. So this character of Persia, Antoinette Cosway, was based on Persia and Jane Eyre. This character aroused the Jane Ray's sympathy, and she was determined to write her side of the story to show her as something other than the mad woman in the attic that Bronte had marginalized in her story. The novel is set in Jamaica in a time of great upheaval following the emancipation of slaves and the freedom of slaves in 1834 and tells the story of Antoinette's childhood, her family tragedy, and how she fell in love with Rochester. So the novel setting is in Jamaica in a time of great changes following the emancipation and the freedom of slaves in 1834 and tell the story of Antoinette's childhood, her family's tragedy, and how she fell in love with Rochester. The themes also we have about racial identity. Whites born in England are distinguished from the white Creole, descendants of Europeans who had lived in the West Indies for one or more generations. And when we talk about Creole, people who have mixed race, white and black, due to the intermarriage between white and black people. Further complicating the social structure is the population of black ex-slaves who maintain their own kinds of classes. Christophine, for instance, stands apart from the Jamaican servants because she is originally from the Caribbean island of Martinique. Interaction between this racial group is often hostile. Antoinette and her mother, however, don't share the purely racist views of other whites on the island. Both women recognize their dependence on the black servants who care for them, feeling a respect that often borders on fear and resentment. In this manner, power structure based on race are always appear on the brink of reversal. So we have both women who recognize their dependence on the black servants who care for them, feeling respect that often borders on fear, resentment. In this manner, power structures based on race are always appear on the brink of reversal. Another theme we have death. Death seemingly hovers over Antoinette's every moment. One of the first memories she recounts and she tells us from her childhood is that her mother's poisoned horse lying dead in the heat and swarming with flies. The image creates a mood of sinister anticipation and points to an evil undercurrent haunting Colibri. The death of a horse also foreshadows the deaths of Pierre and Antoinette's mother, which leaves Antoinette without a family in the hands of Aunt Cora and Mr. Mason. So one of the prevalent ideas and themes is this. This seemingly hovers over Antoinette's every moment. One of the first memories she recounts from her childhood is that of her mother's poisoned horse lying dead in the heat and swarming with flies. This image creates a mood of sinister anticipation and bad omen for Antoinette. The death of the horse also foreshadows the death of Eyre and Antoinette's mother, which leaves Antoinette as an orphan girl without a family and in the hands of Aunt Cora and Mr. Mason. Then we have the characters, Rochester. Although the novel leaves Rochester unnamed, it is common critically practice to call the unnamed male narrator Rochester after the character in Charlotte Brown's Jane Eyre, because of the principal character in Charlotte Brown's Jane Eyre, his name is Rochester too. Antoinette's English husband, who, though never named in the novel, narrates at least a third of the story. Rochester, the youngest son of a wealthy Englishman, travels to the West Indies for financial independence as his older brother will inherit his father's estate. We talked about colonialism, types of colonialism, plantation colonies. You can find it on the channel in order to understand why Europeans, why Englishmen used to leave England in order to live in the settlements and colonies, looking for financial independence and in order to improve their economic situation. So Rochester, as an example, the youngest son of a wealthy Englishman, travels to the West Indies for financial independence as his older brother will inherit his father's estate. Rochester is also an outcast in his family who has come to the Caribbean to make a fortune and possibly find a rich wife as he has no inheritance of his own. So he was searching for money, he was searching for economic betterment and improvement. He is quickly married to Antoinette, who barely knows, and after learning about her history, he is quick to assume that she will become as mad as her mother. So he got married in a hurry to Antoinette without knowing her history and background, but after he comes to know that she is a Creole of mixed origin, he is quick to assume that she will become mad as her mother. He takes away Antoinette's name in an attempt to distance her from her mother and her voice and refuses to listen to her, exasperating her feelings of helplessness and isolation, and by extension, her madness. They move back to England, where he locks his deranged wife in an upstairs garret. So, Rochester, he is named after the character and the principal character of uh, Charlotte Brontë Jane Eyre. Antoine's English husband, though never named in the novel, narrates at least a third of the story. Rochester, the youngest son of a wealthy Englishman, traveled to the West Indies for financial independence. As his older brother would inherit his father's estate, Rochester is also an outcast in his family who has come to Caribbean to make a fortune, to make money, and possibly find a rich wife as he has no inheritance of his own. He is quickly married to Antoinette, who barely knows, he barely knows, and after learning about her history and about her race, he is quick to assume that he will become mad as her mother, and the way he treated her badly. He tried to distance her from her mother and her voice and refuses to listen to her, exasperating her feelings of helplessness, isolation, and by extension, her madness. They moved back to England, where he looked his deranged wife in an upstairs garret like Rochester, how he looked Bertha Mason in the attic in Charles Brontë Jane Eyre. Antoinette, here we have Antoinette, the daughter of ex-slave owners. The daughter of ex-slave owners, and the story, the principal character. She grows up an outcast with no loving parents. Her servants and neighbors disdain her and call her a white cockroach. She goes to school in a convent where she becomes further isolated. She is unable to find any place for herself, making her restless, and she is said to have inherited her mother's madness. Her arranged marriage to an unsympathetic and controlling English gentleman named Rochester exasperates her condition and pushes her to fits of violence. So, Antoinette, she is the daughter of ex-slave owners and the story's principal character. She grows up as an outcast without loving parents. Her servants and neighbors disdain her and call her a white cockroach. She goes to school in a convent. She becomes further isolated. She's unable to find any place for herself, making her restless, anxious, and she's said to have inherited her mother's madness. And her marriage, arranged marriage with unsympathetic and controlling Englishman, a gentleman named Rochester, who sees himself as a white and as a superior guy, exasperate her condition